Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We continue our series of update webinars with a farm policy update today provided by OSU Extension Farm Policy Specialist, Dr. Amy Hagerman. If you have questions, please ask them through the chat window, which may be opened by clicking the chat button at the bottom of the screen. For additional farm management resources, visit the eFarm Management website. And the Ag Policy website also has more information on today's topic as well. I will share these links in the chat window. Dr. Hagerman, I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, thanks, Brent. Thank you for putting this program together. I'm just going to bring up my slides. Okay, so just to confirm, Brent, do you see the regular slide view?
I do, yes.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so what we're going to do today is just go through a few updates from 2019 and 2020, the first 2 years of the Farm Bill's implementation. We're going to talk about some other policy things that have been happening. Of course, we've had a lot happening in 19 and 2018, 19 and 20, really. So, I just want to emphasize that this information is accurate as of today, to the best of my knowledge, especially as we get to some of those transition slides and the expectations for 2021. But obviously things change fast in the policy world. So, obviously keep up to date or contact me with additional questions as situations evolve over time. So as we were going into 2020, what were some of the important issues from 2019? And, last year at this same presentation, I was talking about things like trade, farm financial stress. The hemp program still had some interest in 2019, crop protectant regulations, things like Roundup, also invasive species, feral hog management, red cedar management, and then the new and beginning farmer programs. And that really ties back around to that farm financial stress issue as well. And then we did a survey of producers for our 2019 Farm Bill education program. Some of you may have participated in those, where we asked producers, lenders, crop insurance agents, and other kinds of participants for those programs what their top issues were at that time. This was at the end of 2019 and early in 2020. The top 3 issues they listed were grazing management and stocking rates, cow herd reproductive performance, and drought recovery and preparedness. Other topics that were not quite in that top 3, but kind of clustered together right under that, were things like crop insurance and rainfall insurance. That invasive species management definitely came up in there. And then, trade and market access came up as well. So this was sort of the platform we were on, where we thought we were at the beginning of 2020. Obviously, a lot has happened in this year. And kind of one of the big things was this coronavirus food assistance program, which continued a trend that we had already started seeing through the market facilitation program on ad hoc programs and the impact that has had in agriculture. There's an estimate that for 2020, almost 40% of farm revenues have come from these ad hoc programs because of the market disruptions associated, the continuing market disruptions associated with the trade and the retaliatory tariffs, and then mostly these coronavirus related market disruptions in 2020. So government programs have really been this growing proportion of net farm income since 2018 with the first market facilitation program. So we had MFP 18, we had MFP 19, which if you remember was a very different looking program where it was more county based. You could have as little as a $15 per acre payment in your county, or you could have an over $100 per acre payment in your county for MFP. And then here in 2020, we've had the CFAP program, Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. Oops, I should take off that black box down at the bottom. The deadline has passed. So that program is done now. But that has put a lot of money into Oklahoma here in 2020. So while commodity price expectations are generally trending a little bit higher, and you've already seen presentations about that for the 2020 crop year, we've really had this support through these ad hoc programs above what we saw in our regular safety net programs. A lot of this is because of the involvement in livestock. We have a lot of livestock production here in the state. And we don't necessarily have the same kinds of safety net programs for livestock production when these black swan events happen that we have for crop production. So a lot of that money, that CFAP money, actually went to our cattle producers in the state who just didn't have those safety net programs for the market disruptions associated with COVID. I think that's something to think about going forward into this next year, and that'll lead on into some of our discussion around the next Farm Bill as well. So let's just look at Farm Bill program implementation in 2019. I don't have the complete numbers to make the same graph for 2020 yet. A lot of those numbers will come out in the spring, but you can really see this impact of that MFP in 2019. That made up a pretty significant chunk of government payments coming into Oklahoma. This doesn't represent the entirety of all the programs. I really just picked MFP and then some of the Farm Bill programs to go in here. So this circle you should not be interpreting this as the entirety of all government programs coming into Oklahoma, but it does represent the bigger programs for the state. So for example, the ARC and PLC programs that producers did an election and an enrollment for 2019 and 2020, a lot of our wheat base in the state went to PLC. In fact, nationally, I don't have the number specifically for Oklahoma, but nationally, 93% of all wheat base went into the PLC program for 2019 and 2020. And a lot of that has to do with price. So the PLC triggers when the national marketing year average price for wheat is anything under $5.50. So that price really matters about whether or not you're going to elect into the PLC program or not. And we did see some pretty good payments for wheat per acre under PLC in both 19 and 20. We did have some of our other crops who went more towards the Ark County, specifically some of our soybean base went towards Ark County. The soybean, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but the reference price for soybeans really doesn't lend itself well towards to the PLC program, at least here in Oklahoma. Just in terms of crop insurance, we make a good use of crop insurance here in the state, and that's good. I think especially with some of the disaster events that we've seen in 19 and 20, flooding, freezes, there have been a lot of situations, I think, where that crop insurance was well used here in the state. In terms of conservation programs, we're a good user of these working lands programs to improve conservation practices and the ability. I think that comes back around to our disaster prone areas of the state. Is some of those conservation programs that help control for things like wind erosion, that help control for flooding and helping the land absorb more water. Those are all practices that really help us here in Oklahoma. So we take good advantage of those programs. The Conservation Reserve Program, CRP, that's kind of got a little dot up here in the corner. Let's see where my highlighter is. Well, at any rate, right here underneath program payments, you'll see the little arrow for CRP. We actually have quite a bit of land in CRP here in Oklahoma, and a lot of it expired in 2019 and 2020. It looks like most of that land did go back into CRP, but we did have a bit of a reduction. So it'll be interesting to see what people decide to do with some of the land that came out of that program, if it's being transitioned into cattle grazing, or if it's being transitioned into other uses like wildlife habitat and hunting. It'll be interesting to see from an economist perspective what that land use transition was for CRP. And then finally, our use of disaster programs. We all know that we have a lot of, I'm looking out my window at the snow right now, which is good moisture, but we sure hope we don't get any more tree damage or other kinds of damage, just building damage associated with that snow as well. So this is a bit of a picture of where we are in terms of Oklahoma and these ag policy programs and how we use them. And I emphasize that because I think as we move into 2021, we're really going to be falling back more so on our baseline Farm Bill programs that we have available for risk management. All right, so let's talk a little bit about these marketing year averages and what that could mean in terms of the ARC versus PLC decision. And then just in terms of payment rates going forward into the future. Now, I had mentioned before this wheat reference price. If you look at the very first line there, wheat had an effective reference price of $5.50. That means the national marketing year average. We've seen some recovery in wheat prices in recent months, but nationally across all types of wheat, will we see enough for that marketing year average price? And that ends on May 31st to go up above $5.50 for the year. I think that's a question for our producers in the state that have wheat base to ask themselves. Normally, when we're talking about, election decisions for programs, I'm definitely one of the earlier is better people. But in this particular case, for this particular year, for the 2021 decision, I would say have some patience, watch the markets, see what they're doing as we go into the spring months before making that decision, which you're already watching those markets, you're already making those risk management decisions for your operation. So it's just a matter of kind of having some patience for that. Now, soybeans, we didn't see a payment on soybean base in either 2019 or 2020. We did see a payment for corn in 2019, but didn't see one in 2020. Grain sorghum, there was not a payment in 2020, but I believe there was in 2019. So, some of these prices have kind of flirted back and forth around this effective reference price for the marketing year average. So whatever base you have, I would encourage you to really look at that closely. For our seed cotton producers, 2019 was only their second year in this program. 2020 was their third year. 2021 will be their first time to make a new election decision. But there have been some payments that have come out of both ARC and PLC for seed cotton producers across that period of time as well. So finally, the final note, this actually comes from Ag Manager at K-State. I think they do a nice job of putting together some estimates. This was as of November 30. So obviously you want to look at the most up-to-date report, but just thinking about these 2021 prices, what we had talked about and in reference to the reference prices we saw on the previous slide. So we had talked about wheat being a $5.50 reference price and what that might mean for that decision. You've got, and I'll flip back up there. So you can kind of see if we were to look at corn, for example, the reference price on that is $3.70. So if we come back here on corn and we start looking at these prices and we start thinking about $3.70 as a trigger for something like the PLC program. Now, that means that, we might consider whether or not Arc County would make sense, but I really can't offer because of the variation in the guarantees across the state, because those factor in your historical yield in your state. Those are conversations that I think you could really have with your county educator in asking them questions about kind of how that yield factors in and being able to run some numbers specific to your county. I also think that there are some good tools out there that could be used for that. OSU Extension is not going to put out our joint tool with K-State for this 2021 crop year decision. There are just some additional factors that went into that decision. But there are other tools available for the near term, and we may put something out that's just more simple than what has come out in the past for that as well. So again, just looking at grain sorghum and thinking about what that effective reference price is for grain sorghum. It's $3.95. So, we're looking down here at price expectations. Not all of our price expectations really kind of get up into that range. And then, of course, soybeans with, let me find it here, an $8.40 reference price. It's not necessarily looking like, unless something unexpected happens, it's not necessarily looking like that soybeans are likely to trigger for 2021. In general, in terms of other Farm Bill implementation comments, conservation programs are expected to be open for enrollment in 2021. We've already started to see some conversations around that. So if you have some interest in those programs, you can contact your area conservationist with the NRCS. No big program changes are really anticipated in 2021 during the transition. And that's just because there's a lot that will be changing hands at that point. I think a lot of focus will be on COVID still early in the year. So I don't expect to see a lot of agriculture program changes in that part of the year. So just transitioning into this same idea of a farm policy outlook, I would say keep moving forward, but watch for icy patches, because there is so much that's uncertain in this area going forward. We do have this transition in leadership. We do have additional considerations for COVID-19 related legislation. That hasn't been finalized. I checked unless something has come out in the last few hours, and that's possible because it's all dependent on this deadline on Friday at this point. But unless something has come out in the last few hours, we don't yet have the text of the COVID-19 relief bill that's under consideration right now and the extent to which agriculture will be involved in that. Additional farm bill discussions are beginning. We're already starting to talk about that 2023 farm bill, what that will look like, what will go into that, and we can talk about that as well. And then just these additional considerations beyond 2021 as we start to think long-term about Oklahoma agriculture and what that could mean in terms of policy needs. I think it's always good to have an eye to the big picture. So let's talk just briefly about this transition in leadership. A couple of comments. One is that compared to the leadership that we had in Congress, in the agricultural committees, both the House and the Senate, we've had a bit of a shift east in terms of who's holding those positions. So with David Scott coming in as the incoming chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, after Mr. Conaway's retirement, then that's a shift east in kind of that power. And then with G.T. Thompson as the ranking member, that's a shift east. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Conaway was the ranking member. I was thinking of the 2018 Farm Bill. So again, that shift, Mr. Peterson, and the shift, now we've shifted east. We don't yet know who's going to take Pat Roberts' position. He is retiring. So we'll have to see. I've heard some discussion of maybe somebody from Arkansas or that area. So I think this shift east in power is going to have some implications for us in terms of where we are situated and the kinds of issues that we're concerned with here. There is some discussion that Mr. Lucas might be interested in shifting back onto the Agriculture Committee ahead of the 2023 Farm Bill talks. And I think for Oklahoma, that would be really, really good. And we'd be really happy to see that. Other news recently is there's a discussion of the nomination of Tom Vilsack for Secretary of Agriculture. He's experienced, he's already very familiar with these programs. He's originally from Iowa. So, I think that could be a fine decision for us here in Oklahoma if that was approved and everything. And then just in terms of the new administration coming in, some of the things, there was recently a Farm Foundation program on some of the key areas that they thought the new administration might look at. Trade was very high on that list, rural development, rural health, rural broadband. all very important issues for us here in Oklahoma, kind of equity and building up our underserved farmers and ranchers programs. So that would be, for example, our new and beginning producer programs, which I did list. That was one of the areas where we had a lot of interest here in Oklahoma going into this year. Of course, health, COVID-19, additional research in that area. Those were all areas that were mentioned frequently. Conservation programs, food programs, those were all mentioned. So, I think that there were some areas, some key areas that we could really take advantage of here in Oklahoma during this transition. In terms of COVID-19 considerations, market recovery, we're already starting to see some of that market recovery, but of course, full recovery is going to take time from a total economy perspective, not just here in Oklahoma or in the United States, but globally. And this falling global GDP will likely have an effect on our exports, which will consequently affect our markets. So would we see some additional COVID relief in agriculture, recognizing some of these market situations and the length of time for recovery? I think it's certainly under discussion. In the next couple of weeks, we'll probably tell what that recovery might look like for us. Another area, just generally, COVID-19 vaccine availability, what that might mean for markets, and then also for consumers going forward. So, we saw another continuing resolution last Friday. I don't know if we'll see another continuing resolution that'll push us on the other side of Christmas or not at this point. Sometimes these things have a tendency to come together very quickly, kind of in the last hours. So that is a possibility, but I do think that there's a strong push to not pass an appropriations bill without a COVID relief bill. So we'll just have to watch and see. That's one of those areas I would just have to say, my crystal ball isn't good enough to tell you what's going to happen there. We're just going to have to watch and see. Considerations beyond 2021 nationally, we think about continued demand for disaster programs for extreme weather events. We've had a lot of them in recent years. The 2019 floods up in the Midwest, the freeze, those major windstorm events in the Midwest and the damage that did to agricultural structures, wildfire, and of course drought, although hopefully the snow really helps with that here in Oklahoma. Farm bill discussions for 2023 are really beginning. Will there be new money in this farm bill, or will it be another baseline bill? If it's another baseline bill, we may not see a lot of huge changes as compared to this last 2018 bill. Whereas if there's new money, we might see some bigger changes or some new programs. Will livestock be on the agenda? I think there's been a lot of discussion around this, and this is new. We don't usually get that kind of discussion around livestock being in safety net programs, aside from dairy. But even then, it's about the product. It's not about the livestock itself being in these safety net programs. So will livestock be on the agenda for this farm bill? And what kind of incentives for participation will we see in these risk management programs? How will those change going into the next farm bill? I think another area that we maybe a little distracted from in 2020, but that we really can't lose sight of are export expectations, which are complicated. We had some really good news in 2019 and early 2020. Early 2020 is when the phase 1 trade deal was announced. But, we're looking at a bit of an uphill slide with COVID-19 recovery here and abroad, tariffs and rebuilding relationships in the world, what that will mean in individual commodities. But these trade deals are really encouraging, and that could be good news in 2021 and beyond. So bringing it just a little closer to home here as I wrap up, just to bring it in a little tighter here to Oklahoma, and what do I see and what do I hear here in Oklahoma? First, we're again, just to reiterate, we're going to continue to see demand for disaster programs, for disaster preparedness, for biosecurity information, for risk management and insurance. I mentioned some of those top issues for that 2019-2020 survey. And right there in that cluster under those top three, which were more sort of management issues, were risk management, whether that's invasive species or whether that was insurance. So I think we're going to continue to see demand for that here in Oklahoma. In terms of economic recovery, I think kind of the farm financial management and farm stress are still going to be big topics going forward into the next few years. We've had multiple years where times were just really hard in farm country, and it's going to take time for farms to recover from that and to learn how to be more resilient going forward. Rural development and rural broadband, you know, I think 2020 really highlighted some issues in that area, and there is funding federally to develop some of those programs and take advantage of programs here in the state. And then small business development, again, we've seen a bit of a rallying around small business here in 2020 that I think we could really take advantage of some of that in terms of small business development. And again, business resilience to disruptions like what we've seen here in 2020. And yeah, we lost a lot of businesses here in Oklahoma. I don't know the exact number, but I can just look around my local community and see that we have lost some businesses. So there'll be some rebuilding that happens there. Farm Bill discussions for 2023 for Oklahoma. We're a big livestock state. And since that may be a new area of Farm Bill, what was old is new again. It seems like an agricultural policy, and livestock insurance has come up a lot of times in the policy discussion. So will this be the year that a solution is actually achieved for safety net, for risk management issue for livestock? And there are risk management programs, federal programs for livestock, the subsidized insurance like the livestock risk protection, the gross margin protection. So will we see more of those? Will we see changes in those existing programs, or will we actually see new programs being developed? I think that's a question for us here in Oklahoma. Incentives for participation in conservation programs, I think there's a good chance we could see some additional incentives for participating in conservation programs. But again, this circles back around to that question of, will there be new money in the Farm Bill, or will we have another baseline bill? And that's where these incentives and these subsidies are going to be discussed. And always, crop insurance is always a Farm Bill discussion. Should subsidy rates remain at the level they're at for crop insurance? And I think that's just a discussion that will continue to be held going forward, but that will be very important for us here in Oklahoma. All right, so Brent, that is all I have. I think I slid in under the time barrier. If there are any questions on this snowy afternoon, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it, Dr. Hagerman. And yes, as Dr. Hagerman said, feel free to add any questions you have in the chat screen and be glad to answer them. I will also share a set survey as well for participants to fill out to help give us some good feedback. And Dr. Hagerman shared her email address, amy.hagerman@okstate.edu, for anyone that wants to directly email her.
Well, it is a lot going on out there. There's a lot of transition. There's a lot of wait and see around agricultural policy right now. So if there are questions that people have, even going forward, I put my email address there. So you're welcome to email me directly to ask some of those questions. I hope as we get additional information, we will definitely be sharing that back out. If we get a new program for COVID relief, we'll be sharing that out. If we don't get a new program for COVID relief, we will share that as well, just for clarity and to make sure everybody has the latest information. In terms of deadlines, most of the deadlines passed this last week, but March 15th is the deadline for the ARC or PLC opportunity to re-elect. It's not necessary to re-elect, but you do have to re-enroll. So don't forget about that.
And I still don't see any questions, so yeah, feel free. Now is the time to ask them and be glad to answer them. I will let everyone know that we have our next update webinar scheduled for January 12th. In that one, Dr. Kim Anderson will provide a grain market update. And so that will also be at noon as well, and it will be recorded. And I did not mention it at the beginning of today's session, but this meeting is being recorded and stuff, and so it'll be shared through social media and YouTube and everything. So, any questions? If there aren't any questions, I will wrap up the webinar. Thank you again, Dr. Hagerman, for presenting today. And thank you everyone for joining us. And we will see you on January 12th at noon for the grain market update. So thank you everyone and goodbye.